We, as you know, are in this series on living with wisdom in a world that has lost it, which is the theme of my the Reflections Ministries spring retreat. And still, if we hope some of you might be able to join us at the Cove. It's something that I really would encourage you to consider doing. It's right here. It's not too late, May 14 to 16, to sign up for that. And so what we're doing there is just one session on each of these categories, you see. So it's kind of the overview that kind of crystallizes it, whereas here we're unpacking it a little bit more. So we've done wisdom and Proverbs and Job, and we're completing Job by taking a look at this whole theme in the book of Job about Job 38 to 42 in modern science, and leveraging what we now know that they couldn't have even imagined in that time. And the more we learn about it, what do we discover? The more astonishing the world really does become. And we were exploring several things, the scale of the universe. I'm not going to show all of these things to you, but we were looking at various things to stretch your mind and imagination so you have a bigger vision of God, because big God, small problems, small God, big problems. Your perspective will be shaped by your vision of God on your life, you see. So if that's your greatest point of view, you recognize then He is in control of all things. We were doing things, I think we ended up with this dandelion video, didn't we? And we're looking at the astonishments that produces. I even do some studies in my own garden, and last year I was looking at a Malaysian orchid that I have, and we still have this thing. And this plant it's been a marvel and a wonder to me. This is what it looked like when I started taking a picture of it, and I knew what it was going to become. We've had this plant for a while, and it just creates a structure that's almost beyond belief when you see how extraordinary it really becomes. It gets richer and richer, and after a while it continues, and there's a synchrony. Nobody really grasps how it is that these geometrical forms and shapes are being made. It's not in the DNA itself, but it's actually something that's called epigenetic, beyond that. And it creates this marvelous wonder that we begin to see. And so then it forms a structure like this, and it gets more elaborate until you see it's a very complex structure. And very beautiful, actually, in many ways. You see, I was impressed. And you see the little flowers here at the end as well. So this is far more than what it needs to reproduce. This is glory, this is grace, this is wonder that God has made. So I look at the structure of this thing, and you see that there is this complex geometry. So these beautiful flowers, and subtle patterns and combinations there. And then it has another efflorescence, and it's time to do another shoot and a run. And so all of a sudden, again, in its own chronology, it has its own calendar, and it grows. And look at the structure of these things then. So I marvel at them because it has symmetry on the X, Y, and Z axis. It has this structure that's like this. You see the 5-point symmetry there? Like that. And so 1, and then 2, and then 3 and 4, 5 down there as well. So I just have enjoyed these things to see the beauty of this thing and wonder about it. And then another thing began to come along. You see these red ones in the bottom? A little bit different. And I didn't realize, I hadn't studied this before, but you have these, but you also now have these. And I realized these red ones are actually like seeds, whereas these are like flowers. And again, far more than it needs for reproduction. Then we brought it in for the spring, because it was going to get cold for the fall. And we brought it inside so that more of these little things came up. Now it looks like this on the outside. We brought it back out. Now it's all just the red ones, you see. So it's like it's got its own ecosystem, its own chronology, its own response to nature, and it's far, far more glory than you'd ever need in order for a thing to reproduce. So I just enjoy studying of these kinds of things. Remember, that's my background as a scientist, and I enjoy seeing the diversity and the work of the living God in these areas. And so my own Malaysian orchid thing was one of those components. There's something else that I have been doing here. I actually had a book that turned it into a PDF called Living Jewels. And I have a second volume of Living Jewels, which I want to show you later on. God is very fond of beetles and has made something on the order of 350,000 species of beetles. Why do you need that? And by definition, a species is distinguishable from another species, you see. And you're not going to combine them. There's very limits on that. So why do you need so many? Because he likes them. He enjoys beauty. This is so much beyond what is necessary, you see. Look at they're like jewels, you see, this chitin layer, and various strange creatures, you see, in many ways. And no two of them are the same, yet we can categorize them as beetles, but look at how different this one is from this one, and that from that, and that one from that. So again, it's play with color and shape and texture and design. So this one has these little things on the end here that for some reason he decided to give it. And again, you look at the structure of this and how very different this one is, and yet this one and another and another and another. And so I begin to marvel, just the lovely colors, the patterns, the designs. And you know, if you and I were asked around your table, I want you to design a beetle, okay? You'd probably be able to come up with several designs, but it'd be like a little kid trying to figure it out, you know? You could come up with maybe 10 or designs and so forth that are distinguishably different, but then you have to make 100, and then you have to make 1,000. Now you have to do 10,000, now 100,000. How would you be doing? And besides which, you wouldn't be able to make any of them work. It's one thing to design the thing, it's another to make it work. They have respiratory systems, they have digestive systems, they have all the kinds of systems that you need to have, and it's little hinged legs and so forth, and all of it works in perfect function, and each of them works a little different than the other one. They have their own modalities. So God loves variety. He enjoys this, and you see the exquisite colors. Now look at this one. What does it need this for? You see? And if, by the way, if you were to see these two together, you'd say, well, somebody must have put them together like that. I'll make a comment on that in a moment. So these are just the kinds of things that God enjoys. It's like God's play. You see, like look at this one here. This thing is incredible how long that goes back there, you see. You don't need that. It's redundant. It's not redundant. It's beyond what is necessary. So I just enjoy seeing this glory and this wonder. Maybe I'm a nutcase, but the more I look at this, the more amazed I become at anything in the created order. And that's my point here, is that God does this. And what's intriguing about this is if you were to see these things, again, look at them. What's fun about this is that when you look at them, they're beyond imagination as to how they fully function and work. And so you just gives you a feel like this one here. What is that about? Why does he need that? What are these little things on the end? You see? It's what's that?
Modern hairstyles.
Yeah, modern hairstyles. This a hirsute beetle. Yet this one, compare this one with this guy. You see? And so it goes. So I just enjoy such things. Maybe you think I'm a nutcase, but I think it's and then these rhino beetles, you see. What is this about? So there's a kind of a play in God's work as I see it. What's interesting about that is that if you see these beetles, there's something suspicious going on here. If you look a little closer, you're going to see something. A VW beetle spotted in the insect collection at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. So some jokester stuck it in to see if anyone would notice that. Now, what does that tell you about this, though? What do we learn from this? As soon as you see that, what do you conclude? What do you conclude? That was designed by human intelligence. That was an intelligent agency, right? But we regard these as having been a product of mutations in natural selection. And these are millions of times more elegant and complex than anything we can design. Do you see how this has worked now? That the crime of the age in many ways is for the Creator to no longer be acknowledged, for them to have come up with a system that they were desperate to have to eliminate God. And they came up with this illusion that Darwinism made it possible to be an intellectually respectable atheist. And actually, the more we learn about it, the more the system has fallen apart, because neo-Darwinism is not adequate to the task and cannot account for any of the systems that you're beholding here. But people are still being told that because that's the narrative, and that's what people want. People want to not have God in their lives. So I find it to be very intriguing how we can see this and we fail to see it. I thought that you'd get a kick out of that. Another thing that, I'll give you another example of that, rock cairns. And I came across this guy who makes these things. But you see, if you saw this by a riverbed, what would you conclude? Clearly, it's like a turtle on a fence post, right? You all think about that. You ever see a turtle on the top of a fence post? There's only three options. It had to be there. That's not a good option. Maybe there was a gust of wind that blew it up in a storm and picked it up and plopped it and deposited it on top of that pole. Is that a good option? Maybe the third option, that somebody put it there, is a good thing to consider. That's called abduction, inference to the best explanation. And that is the best explanation, that design. But many scientists refuse to even embrace that possibility that it could be designed. And that is, to me, a bias. And best science, though, always uses inference to the best explanation to determine what's this about. So what would your inference be if you saw this or this in the woods, or this or that? You see? It's very nice. Somebody did a great balancing act. But you know, it wasn't something that was naturally put there. This becomes even more obvious, and this. And then I came across this Pontus Jansson, and a Swedish fellow who apparently his whole life seems to be devoted to making these things. So here's some of his work. And these are actual things, and there's videos that show how he does it. The guy is a master at actually putting these things together, and some of them are works of wonder. Look at this crazy thing he's built. And there are videos of his work showing that. So the guy's made thousands of these things. And you can watch him, and he just has some way, a genius about him, that he's knowing exactly how this will go and moves them until they fit. And you'd say, how can this be that a person can put that together like this? I mean, look, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? And I mean, if you want to give your life to that, I mean, but it is a kind of artwork, isn't it? Very temporary artwork, but that's very impressive. But he literally balances these things, and as soon as you see that, you know this is not something that you're going to find in nature. This is something that's beyond what you'd have. But my point is, even the fringe of God's ways is far, far more profound than those balancing acts. Because if you look at the balancing within your own cell and all that's taking place there and the perfection that's going on, this factory, this, as I said before, is more complex than the entire city of Atlanta. Now, we're impressed with the balancing there, but nobody even thinks about how vastly more complex it is that God does what he does, that we can even have this conversation and this discussion. So I find that to be very interesting, just to explore those implications. There's a Discovery Institute is one of the places that I like to go to for some resources, and on the YouTube. So Discovery Institute. Another one is the John 10:10 Project, very, very good. And so the biology of the Baroque, there's a kind of a whole theme. I won't go into all of it, but where you see, as the video starts, looking at the nature of the world itself. It comes from Baroque pearls, which are odd-shaped things. Something that's ornamented, elaborate. And to use that idea then, the Baroque in nature then is very elegant indeed. And so we see this in cathedrals and so forth. and as opposed to the Bauhaus thing, sort of thing here, that's just ugly and really not very impressive at all. Nature is far more tasteful than anything we can make. So you begin to look at this, and this Michael Denton talks about gratuitous beauty. He talks about non-adaptive coding, which means this stuff isn't there for its survival. It's just there for beauty and for elegance, and that's what it's beyond what you need. And you just see this, just even the structures of this. Very big on the yawning. You see that? kind of like that. But look at this marvel, and the nature of God's work and all His ways. And we see this actual exquisite wonder, and he discusses this, and I won't go into too many of the details here, but he discusses this lovely idea of what that's about. He makes a comment about this here.
So okay, if it's just a maple leaf, we can perhaps pass over the maple leaf, but if non-adaptive order, like the maple leaf, permeates the biological world, then if a lot of the taxa-defining novelties seem to be non-adaptive, you now have a nightmarish scenario when the fundamental assumption of Darwinism is that all the novelties in nature are adaptive. Suddenly looks very insecure.
In this video, he's going on to just looking at various aspects of the natural world. And I love time-lapse photography. And when I see the way that God designs this flower, this simple beauty here, that the elegance where it slowly unfolds, you see, and has these basic fundamental structures that are there. And so when we see this, there's something that causes me to see and take pleasure in that beauty. And it involves great complexities, Fibonacci sequence and other things like this. And we see it not only in flowers, of course, but in all of nature. So we see, for example, these shells and again, the sequence that's going on. I just love these, this variety in color and so forth that you can behold on the Nautilus. And everywhere you look, if you look at the natural world, train yourself is what I want you to do. I want you to train yourself to be have a greater acuity, a greater sense of the glory that we're beholding around. You're surrounded with it, and most people don't even notice it. I want you to be a person to be different. I want you to look at trees. I want you to look at flowers. I want you to look at insects. I want you to look at anything in the created order, and what you're going to see is something that points beyond itself to the glory of the living being, the living one who made all things. So we could just go anywhere you want in the natural world, and it's an astonishment. Just the structures and so forth that we see in the variety of the millions of species. I particularly love jellyfish. And so you see this glory and this beauty of the chambered nautilus. And all of this, then, I believe, is something that we can see with new eyes. And that's what I want you to do. Look at nature doxologically. What does doxological mean? What does that mean? With praise. It means the glory of God. It has to do with a word of glory. So that you glorify God, so that the more you see the natural world through the lens of that beauty of God, the more amazed you become. Now the pufferfish, now some of you saw this video that I sent to you, but it's my pleasure to show it to you this way, and just to make a couple comments about that as well. So if I can find that for you here, I have so many things. I have things I forgot that I even have, you see. But this pufferfish this is something from a David Attenborough thing, so let's watch this.
Unfortunately, this small Japanese pufferfish is dull, almost to the point of invisibility. But to compensate, he is probably nature's greatest artist. To grab a female's attention, he creates something that almost defies belief. His only tools are his fins. In his head, a plan of mathematical perfection. He ploughs the sand, breaking it up into the finest of particles. These shells aren't just rubbish to be removed. He uses them to decorate the ridges of his construction. He can't rest for more than a moment, but must work 24 hours a day for a week, or the current will destroy his creation. A final tidy up, and his masterpiece is complete. Nowhere else in nature does an animal construct something as complex and perfect as this. If this doesn't get him noticed, nothing will.
Is that what it's about? Just, getting him noticed? This is far more than just getting him noticed, you see. He's made a cathedral. He's made something so extraordinary that it's almost it boggles the imagination. In fact, I compare that puffer fish, and you can see him down there, you see right there. He's not looking up there. How's it looking? He's using his ventral fin, and he's just doing this whole thing, and it's all in its mind. This is more than you can imagine. It's all, somehow, God has implanted that wisdom in this remarkable creature. And so that's what I love about the video. It doesn't reveal it until then you realize what he's actually making. And he's not even able to go up and see above that. And you know what that made me think of? It made me think about rose windows. You see, because it's very much like a rose window, isn't it? Because you compare this thing and you realize that's what you're looking at here. It's something that's glorious. That same kind of a glory we make, and we are impressed by our works, you see. But really, in many respects, it's about the same kind of a pattern, you see. It's all wired in there. But it's intelligent design, intelligent agency that we behold in this that actually causes us to see so many extraordinary things. The nature of these organisms is just beyond belief. So again, I'm only compounding these to give you an idea, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm just going to show you one other thing here, just to show you the handiwork of God, the beautiful creatures that he has here that are just, again, just in this short thing here, you'll see an array of things that are hard to believe. that's just crazy. When I look at these things, it is actually beyond my imagination. So when I see something like this and look at these things, this is beauty. It's just elegant and flowing, and he's a whole array of these things. This is not just for survival. This is gratuitous beauty. I could never invent this little guy here. Look at this crazy thing. I don't have the imagination. And even if I could invent what it would look like, I can't make them work. You see? And so I look at the glory of God. I don't know, this isn't a marvel here. This is the leafy sea dragon, you see. And again, what does it tell you about the work and the wonder of what God has done? And I think God loves it when people say, I'm glad you noticed. Because most people don't notice. They take it for granted, and that's a terrible mistake to make. So I look at these extraordinary things, and I want to know. Here, what they're doing, they're actually taking their turn, feeding off the bottom, you see. It's like a unity and diversity here. One of my favorite things, though, I have to say, there are a couple of things I call your attention here. One of those is, this is a marvel, of course, this beauty. It just goes on and on, it seems forever. But this thing here, like these little happy guys, you see, we kind of look like little feet there, and little eyes, and the strangest creatures. But this, I didn't realize, you see how they work independently of one another? And this strange structures that you see. But and these are these leaf insects. And they cannot develop, they can't evolve to look like leaves just overnight. You have to have a pathway for doing that. And there's no developmental pathway. It talks about purpose and something anticipating that. And then for me, the most amazing thing, I want to see more of this, is this guy here. How on earth, this leaf, it is a leaf, isn't it? Wait, it wasn't a leaf. See how quick I can't even get the point at which it transforms into a butterfly. How is that possible? You know what that should do? That should give you awe. That should increase a sense of holy wonder, a sense of almost terror. What kind of a mind can make that? You see, if you're in the hands of that being, then you realize that the very one who made all of that, who made matter and energy and space and time, the very one who spoke that into being, the Logos, then becomes one with us. And not only to come to be with us, to take on the solidarity of the human condition, but to give his life as a ransom for us. So that the infinite word becomes the incarnate word and then becomes the indwelling word. So my desire for you, I suppose, would be a very simple one in many ways. It would be that you amplify your vision of the greatness of the living God. You could pick anything you want. You could pick millions of things, and any one further analyzed would reveal something about it. So what I want you to see is, if God can do these things, how can he manage your life? So can he take care of if he's in control of that, can he be in control of what his purposes are? So this is my point here. Why do we miss this so often? So I want you to just kind of chew on that. I could go on forever. Obviously, you could go on forever with nature, boundless. And I'm going to be kind of just tying it together next week and then moving on to the Psalms. But so how is the pufferfish fossil using ventral fins and making these wonderful things? What do you learn from beetles? What do we learn about the mind of the maker? Why do we attribute intelligence to these nice, clever things we make, and then the things that are boundlessly more complex, we actually say that's just chance and time? You see where I'm going with that? So there's a fundamental, I think, pleasure that you can gain and that God enjoys when you bless his name by leveraging the visible into the invisible. So let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. What thing came to your mind at any table? Anything that struck you? Because you see, my assignment is for you to train yourself to have an acuity that most people have not developed. That is to say, to begin to have the seeing eye. Remember that poem that I so often quote by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Earth's crammed with heaven. and every common bush afire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit round and pluck blackberries. Most people miss it. It's right in front of them, the glory of God. Every tree, every common bush is afire with God. If we only could train ourselves to have the acuity to see the glory of the living God in his world. And so to me, when I behold the glory of God, that's a burning bush, you see. But you know, this is also a burning bush. You see? That's a burning bush. A dandelion, a weed we call it. This is beyond anything we could ever construct, as we saw before. And the glory of God is so palpable, so evident, so amazing, so rich and full that we rather take it for granted. But don't do that. Begin to be astonished at him. And the more we do that, the more we train ourselves to actually have an eye for his beauty, for his goodness. And when we do that, the bigger your God, then the greater your perspective, and you realize then how ephemeral are these flowers. Like a flower of the field, so we flourish. Remember, he himself knows our frame. He is mindful that we are but dust. You see, as a flower of the field, so he flourishes. When the wind has passed over it, it is no more, and its place acknowledges it no longer. But the one who then pursues God, the loving kindness of the Lord is forever and ever on those who fear him. So the concept then is to train ourselves who will not fear him, who will not see and behold and marvel at the grace and the glory of the Maker of all things, including this. So in doing that then, my desire is that you amplify your perspective and realize the precious present now. He'll show you things, but you must have the seeing eye and the hearing ear. Because it's there, but you have to train yourself to see it and to hear it. And the more you do that, I think the more biblically you will walk, the more you'll see how marvelous things are. What other thought did you have? Any other? Yes?
A question.
A question.
Pufferfish down on the other side of the seafloor, is he making the exact same design as what we saw? Or is it different?
Is he making the same design, the pufferfish, as what?
Another pufferfish, are they the same design?
If it's other fish make its own pufferfish at a different location.
Oh, a different pufferfish? This I do not know, because I only discovered about this pufferfish quite recently. And what do pufferfishes do? I would suspect that no two, of course, are going to be the same. They would probably have that general geometry, but no two would be identical by its very nature. It'd be very interesting, wouldn't it, to compare pufferfish creations and see, because they would all probably have that general that general rose window kind of a thing, wouldn't they? But it would never, no two would ever be identical, just as in nature, you never see the same thing twice, because although it may be the same plant, you'll see it, it's always going to be somehow different in its variety. So that in spite of this beautiful orchid here, that at the same time, no two will be the same. Yes?
Kid, I think Attenborough stated in the documentary, the BBC documentary, it was the first time it was ever recorded and where they ever connected it.
Yeah, because I'd never heard of such a thing. And now, what wonders are there around that you haven't even heard of, you see? Yes?
I think Satan is working to congregate men into cities.
Yes.
The purpose of getting them away from nature.
Yeah. The urbanization. Yeah. They're not immersed in the natural world. They're in an artificial world of our own construction. And the actual architecture is often so ordinary, because nature doesn't have any straight lines. That's why I love Antonio Gaudi. He's the guy who did Familia Sagrada, the cathedral in Barcelona, which is a marvel and a wonder, because he's taking his cue from the organic realm, and it's an astonishment to see. One last thought here, if I can find it here, is this. I don't have it here. I have.
Think of the arrogance of man, like John Kerry, who's going to save the world because of global warming.
Yeah. and all these narratives that we embrace that are delusional rather. And so I think that my takeaway for you is for you this week to train yourself to see beauty where you haven't noticed it before. And how do you respond to the one who made that beauty? I was sharing this text here that we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works. You are above those creatures. You're the pinnacle of his created order. And you and I alone have the capacity to see it, behold it, and imagine that.